Welcome to the Banff World Media Festival. Your session is about to begin.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're lucky to have such a great quartet of panelists with us this evening. As you know, these four basically run our media world here in Canada. They are our media leaders, and we're lucky to have them on the stage at the same time. Kirsten Stewart from the CBC, Keith Pelley from Rogers, Paul Robertson from Shaw, and Kevin Crull from Bell. So thank you very much for joining us. As the old adage goes, not since Benjamin Franklin dined alone has so much mental capacity been assembled in one room at the same time. Now, I know that nothing at all has happened in the Canadian media scene in the past 12 years. It's been a complete snore. So there's probably not much to talk about, really, but hoping that you'll dredge up a few little nuggets to give to us, I'd like to ask each of you to give us just a minute or two reflection on the past 12 months and what you see as your main challenges for the year ahead. Then we'll go to a Q&A amongst ourselves, and then I hope we have enough time left over to spend perhaps 10 or so minutes inviting questions from the floor. So, Kevin, do you want to go first?
Sure.
You've been doing nothing in the past year, have you?
Well, thank you, Michael. And it's a pleasure, Fern. Thank you very much. This is my second time joining Banff, and so really, really happy to be back. I think all of my colleagues here will agree the last year has been certainly one of crazy change and pressure on the industry. And so I think our panel, in the questions, there's three things I'm going to want to talk about in my answers, but I'd rather set a context first, I think, for the way that you'll hear a big passion for Canadian content, Canadian-produced, Canadian talent, and not just because we have to, actually because strategically we absolutely do think it fits and makes sense for our business. The second thing will be the relationship between players in the ecosystem, from producers to broadcasters to distributors to the consumer. I think that ecosystem has never been under more relationship strain than it is now. And then the third thing, I do have some ideas and recommendations to make it better. But on the context of what we face, we have a lot to be proud of in the Canadian broadcast system, a lot to be proud of. We have the highest penetration of pay television in the developed world. We have the lowest consumer prices. And in broadband, you heard last week at the Telecom Summit from the chair of the CRTC, Len Katz, talking about the great penetration of over 5 megabit speeds. And we also have the highest online consumption of video of developed countries. Happy consumers and a system that works for producers and writers and developers and Canadian talent, as well as broadcasters and distributors. But for a couple of reasons, the system is really under more pressure than it's ever been. Fragmentation that we talked about for the last of advertising revenue, we've talked about that for 10 or 15 years. It's gone on steroids. And that's putting massive pressure on advertising as a source of revenue to cover television production and distribution. The third is paid distribution, cable distribution, satellite. It's a pretty mature industry now. You know, the penetration is quite high. The take rate of packages and bundles of content is quite high. So we're no longer enjoying sort of nice double-digit growth from household penetration and upsell. And that puts a lot of pressure on the economics of the system as well. And the third thing is that the technology that has facilitated piracy, OTT, time-shifting, user-generated content, these are irreversibly impacting the business model that we do. And you know, some of them are great for consumers, but the business model is under a lot of attack. So that's my opening, that's the context for, I think, the way that you'll hear us answer and dialogue about a lot of the issues.
Thank you. Now, you guys, Kevin took all your time, so you don't have any time to speak. Paul, briefly, do you?
Well, he has an iPad.
He's very good.
Notes.
Actually, he's watching Netflix. Go figure.
It's the global app,
actually. Okay. Thanks very much. Well, well then, Kevin, it's a privilege to work in this industry, and it's great to come to Banff to celebrate the the main course, which is all the programming that we get involved in. In our view, television's never been stronger. It's not the appliance, it's not the platform, but the television experience that I'm referring to. When we went down to Barb and our team and I went down to LA and watched all the pilots with these guys, and I think they'd agree, extraordinary quality of programming that were being presented to us down there. In Canada, I don't think our work's ever been better. We just got a record audience on a program called Continuum that I watched again on my iPad on the plane on the way here. And the quality of these sorts of shows are just extraordinary. So, you know, we're thrilled about the state of programming, and we just need to continue to free ourselves up to do better and better work. The elephant in, maybe not in this room, but in the rooms that I'm in at the office, relate to the performance of conventional television. And we've often talked about the big networks as the cornerstone of our industry. If one believes that that cornerstone needs to be maintained and nurtured, then we've got a lot of work to do as an industry to continue to make it relevant and vibrant as those revenues start to shift downstream to specialty and then further into digital, where we haven't really been able to capture the revenues as powerfully. So I'll stop there, Michael.
Thank you. Keith.
Well, first and foremost, because many of you were probably traveling or at a session, the Blue Jays did win today. They,
thank goodness.
Yeah, so 12-4 today, so they got one out of the games in Atlanta. Listen, it's been just an unbelievable year of change, and I think what Kevin has in his hand has been an incredible game changer, and that's the tablet. And it certainly has changed our business at Rogers Media overnight. And the example I can give you is publishing. If we had sat here a year ago and I said to you, how many people read ebooks, you might have maybe one or two maybe have put up their hand. Many of you wouldn't have even known what an ebook was. It might have been just a PDF file. Overnight, publishing in terms of magazines has gone from a mature business to an absolute growth engine. We're going to launch like 100 ebooks in the next 6 months, and that's how quick the industry can change. And the tablet has certainly changed that. I think the biggest challenge we're facing now is, over the years, you've seen advertising go like this. You had the big drop in 2009, then it came back in 2010. Right now, I don't think it's an actual cyclical advertising market right now in terms of the broadcast industry. It's a market shift. And marketers have so many options to spend their dollars, whether it be through paid media, owned media, or earned media. And that is really going to change the way that we're forced to do business going forward. And I think it's something that we really have to understand, that it is putting real hard pressure on the industry right now.
Kirsten.
Well, it's interesting because I think everyone talks about pressure, and I think we're all feeling it in different ways. We all have different roles to play, and it is very much a media ecosystem. Like, I really do see that media in Canada in particular works very much together, and we're very much intertwined and integrated in our own way with each other. And I think the pressure that we're each feeling in different ways, has resulted in some great innovations and some great programming that has come out in the last year, particularly in Canadian programming. So I think it's an interesting time for us in Canada. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, but this pressure actually forms. That's where the diamonds form, right? Is when you're under this kind of pressure. And we never had a better year for Canadian content in terms of what we've seen on the air and how people have been getting it through digital means and the kinds of things that we're launching. Under this kind of pressure, actually, I think makes us be that much more flexible and that much more kind of innovative in that digital space. And so I think it's an interesting time as a public broadcaster in particular, when you see the great things that are happening around the world and how we can play a part of that.
So folks, we've got a new chair of the CRTC, just announced a couple of days ago, JP Blais. I'll ask the private guys first and then Kirsten afterwards. What advice would you give to him? I assume that everything is not entirely perfect. What would you like to see? What do you need from the CRTC under this new regime in the next year or two? Hand it to you three guys, but Keith, do you want to go first?
Message that I would say congratulations first. I guess I would probably give 2 or 3 messages. One is, is I think we need harder regulatory control in an area that I believe that we are being threatened. And obviously with the unregulation of the over-the-tops, the Netflix, the Apples, the Googles, you know, they're threatening our business. And if they're going to be unregulated, which the Commission has said they are, then I believe that the legacy platforms like linear television need to have more flexible rules. And I think regulation needs to be reduced on those. A perfect example is we would not be able to launch an SVOD service currently on the set-top box based on the regulation. So we need fewer regulations to be able to compete in the OTT environment. The second I would say is we need to somehow address piracy. Piracy is becoming a huge issue that really not a lot of people talk about. And I certainly have a couple of neighbors down the street that are 14 and 15-year-old kids that spend most of their time on piratebay.com. And I think we need to congregate as an industry and deal with piracy because it is threatening our industry. The other I would probably say is once and for all, let's remove in linear television, let's remove genre exclusivity. We're all of us here are certainly looking at our conditions of license and are playing with the rules. You could go through Kevin's channels, you could go through Paul's channels, you could go through my channels, and you could sit there and say, okay, come on, you're stretching the rules. So let's get rid of genre exclusivity. Let's let the best content win, and let it let's take that right out of the mix. So those are three things. There's probably a lot of them, but those are three.
That'll keep them busy. Paul.
Great. Well, yeah, Jean-Pierre's been around a long time and brings a lot of experience to the role, so I'm sure he'll have some pretty good ideas coming in the door. I guess what we'd ask of him is to, again, consider the competitive frame of reference to be about, in the digital world, to be about Google and Facebook, and come to understand just how big a role that they play in our world now. We have advertisers who say to us, well, you know, you don't have what you have last year because internationally we locked out 30% for those guys. And now you're dealing with the rest to be split among you. And those, it's, you know, kind of surprising when you hear it phrased that way. So given that's the frame of competition, that's where, you know, we got to send our strongest warriors out there to do battle with them with every possible advantage that we can help to give them. We should be thinking of trying to aid us in that fight.
Kevin, anything on your mind?
Well, I think on the new media, both Paul and Keith are talking about symmetry. And that has always been a Bell principle when it comes to regulation. We understand that there needs to be oversight of the industry. What we ask for is predictability. And I would say that in the past period, this commission has been poor at that. They would make a decision, and business adapts to the decision, and then they change it. So 3 or 4 major decisions have been, that weren't even 18 months old, have been undone after industry adapts, and actually industry puts capital against the business after those. Predictability, symmetry across players. I also see a frightening lack of symmetry, where it becomes favoritism, I don't know, manipulation, I don't know, but where players are not treated equal.
What would those be, for example?
Group licensing is an example. I think vertical integration is an example. And then I think, as Keith pointed out, there's also probably in all of our different licenses, there's a lot of historical maybe nuances, but things that are very different, that have an impact. And then the last thing I'd say is definitely operate with a bias towards free market. And then intervene when the free market doesn't satisfy the objectives. We have a clear set of objectives for the Canadian broadcast system. The free market has been known to allocate capital and to create benefits for consumers, for producers, distributors, business, and the economy. We seem to try and manipulate markets before they form and write extensive sets of rules. I would rather see sort of post facto intervention when things go wrong.
Kirsten.
It's interesting, the world moves so fast, and I know I asked my head of regulatory affairs, because now our license renewal has finally been announced for this coming November, when was the last time we had our review? And I know it hadn't been the time that I've been there for the last 6 years, and it's actually 12 years ago was the last time the CBC had been reviewed. So, I think in a world, not that we call for more review, more regulation, but I think in a world where things move so quickly, predictability, symmetry are obviously really important, so is speed. Things move so quickly, and an understanding, a really deep and thorough understanding of what's going on outside of Canada, because that is going to be affecting us the most. I think as Paul was pointing out, the Googles and the Facebooks of the world and those things that happen outside of Canada, we're so sometimes myopic looking at what happens here that sometimes we miss the bigger picture and what could be happening and influencing us very quickly without any of our control.
There's a lot of producers, independent producers in the audience here and at Banff in general. So my next question is, what are the issues and challenges that the four of you see around Canadian content? And specifically, what are the issues from your perspective affecting independent producers, and including vis-a-vis their deal with the three of you anyway in terms of trade? I know CBC has not signed that, but it's a general question, then with a subset around independent producers. Kirsten, do you want to go first?
We were, I think, the first or maybe the only broadcaster for a while to have in terms of trade. It's been long-standing, but it's obviously something we're talking to the CMPA about still. I think, our relationship with the independent production community is so incredibly important. That is how we get the great programming that people want to watch on CBC television or download. It is the best relationship. It's a partnership. And I think what we have to remember in this world where things do move so quickly is the rules change. And so how we compensate, how we share rights, these are the kind of things that we have to be incredibly flexible with so that we don't fall behind. Because I worry very much that the more we get caught in a conversation or a debate, and the more we might be divisive about something, again, the more the outside might be able to take over when we're not ready. And we have great talent here, so we should actually give it the platform that it needs. And we can't do that if we're in a lot of endless discussions. We've got to get moving.
I think the advertising shift, which I've talked about, is real, and that will affect the independent community, and it is actually made us look closer at things like the terms of trade agreement. And I'm not really sure, in having talked to many independent producers, if they actually believe that we have the right agreement. Certainly, from a broadcasting perspective, I don't think it works. We did support it during the group-based licensing agreement, but like I said, the industry can change like that. To be able to only reap in 30% of the profits, to do a 5-year license term, the way that the tax credit works on it, it makes it really detrimental to encourage broadcasters to go out, and you have to be far more creative. And I think when I talked about regulatory, and Kevin used the word free, regulatory freedom is going to be critical. And if we look at what's happening south of the border, compared to the way that we handcuff ourselves in producing Canadian content, it's challenging. Just look at the CMF and look at what counts in the CMF and what doesn't count in the CMF. So I think we have to take a real hard look, both from the broadcasting perspective and from the independent community, at the terms of the trade agreement, at CMF, and how we can, and certainly it's real, and the advertising shift will affect Canadian content, because obviously with CPEs being so critical to what you actually spend your dollars on, if your advertising shift it goes down, and we don't have the regulatory freedom to generate revenue in other areas in the set-top box, that's going to affect the independent community dramatically, because you're not going to have as much money to spend on Canadian content.
Before Paul and Kevin speak, do you have any specific suggestions on how the CMF or the CMPA terms of trade? Oops.
That's all right.
I almost hit her blue pants.
You almost got your BlackBerry.
Oh, yeah.
I hope Rogers has a good plan for that.
Any specific suggestions for changes to the CMF or the terms of trade deal?
I think, Michael, we just have to, look at what counts in the CMF and what doesn't. Like we're producing a couple of shows, and I won't mention them that don't count in the CMF, and it just makes no sense. And if you actually look at the definitions, and I think the independent producers would probably agree, but when you start to actually determine what you're going to produce based on what counts in a CMF, is that really what we want to be doing? Like, is when we decide what we're going to produce because it is going to be a 6 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10, and we feel that this one is we're not going to be able to monetize that internationally, so that one's a good one to do. I think we're just handcuffing ourselves. So I think it really needs a full overview.
Paul and Kevin, over to you two.
Well, we don't share the same concerns as you, Keith. I mean, we were early adapters of the terms of trade, but we haven't been disappointed by how it's been administered in the marketplace. You know, I think like anything, it has to continue to evolve with changes in the industry. But we'll do over 800 hours of Canadian programming next year in, you know, so many different ways, so many different deals. I mean, I think it allows for that kind of flexibility. I think one thing we should continue to look out for is creativity in sharing of future revenues. I think that's would be a poor area to get stuck in a rut on. I think we should be thinking about optimizing the property rather than how we count it up when it's all done. Sometimes we can miss some of the opportunities by not thinking about how we optimize it from the get-go.
The only thing I'll say very quickly to you on that, the terms of the trade might work right now in this, but are they going to work 5 and 10 years down the road? And that's what we need to be producing programs for, of what's happening down the road and how the consumer is actually consuming media. That's a critical point.
Yeah, I think it needs to evolve as it goes.
And Kevin will now tell us.
Try to be brief. So Corey Coe is here and runs our relationship and our independent production, and I couldn't be happier. And Corey was a key architect along with Tracy Pierce, and it took a long time to get the terms of trade. And I think that the kinks that needed ironed out are getting worked out through the working group. And there's no question that there are things that we would like in our own self-interest where we'd like to pay less and get more. But I think that it was a balance, and I think it was something that was pretty critical for all the change that I think that Keith rightfully points out. People who are investing money and making risk capital bets on this industry need to have some degree of certainty. They need to have some comfort in a foundation of the business, and I think that's what the terms of trade did for a part of the ecosystem. I think that other parts of the ecosystem really lack that.
So that discussion of independent producers vaguely connects me to my next question. There's been a lot of consolidation in the industry, and Bell has got an application forthcoming soon, I assume, to acquire Astral. So the question is, should there still be independent broadcasters? Like, does it matter? And if it does, are there any steps that could be taken to ensure their continued existence?
Maybe I'll start, Michael.
Sure.
You know what? One other thing I did want to add, though, because I think it's relevant on some of the funds and things, what I think is really critically important. We launched a new program, Saving Hope, last week, and very, very excited about the success of this program. But there's a lot of digital promotion, a lot of co-viewing investment in apps and things of that sort. And I think one thing I would say is I want to make sure that the economics of production now take into account, and that the various funds and things of that sort allow us to really invest, because I think that's what's going to help make tomorrow's hits. As to vertical integration and consolidation, we are very, very excited for what Astral brings to Bell Media. It fills a number of important gaps in our portfolio. The province of Quebec and French-produced content is critically important to our overall strategy. And we didn't have a presence other than in sports in RDS in that province. And so, as you all well know, Astral brings a number of great properties. The out-of-home business is an area that we weren't in, and we think that it is important. We think that scale is, as the industry goes through all the challenges that we've talked about, I think the only way we're going to be able to invest and innovate is if you have enough scale to support it. And so I think that that's critically important to do the kind of things, to invest in new platforms, to invest in tomorrow's content, and to invest in new business models. As for the term vertical integration and the need for independence, I think it's kind of crazy, and I think that it gets a lot more press than it should. And the reason I say that is, first of all, on the one hand, vertical integration has been spectacular. Remember, before Paul's company bought CanWest, they were in bankruptcy. Whenever Bell bought CTV Globe Media, it was headed towards bankruptcy and was having cash calls from its owners regularly. So there is now, with large companies that have made these investments, again, there's a bit of certainty and stability for the industry even when we go through bad patches. And we would not have had that before consolidation and vertical integration. Secondly, we've invested in CTV since we bought it, probably $50 million of capital and $100 million of expense that would not have been invested when it was independent. It would not have happened. And so I find it to be a fantastic thing. Now, the fear of the boogeyman of vertical integration is just crazy too. There's two key rules that don't allow us to do anything untoward or unfair, and it's no exclusives and no preferences. And so those two things take care of everything that we might cook up in a vertical untoward way. And otherwise now, we just run a media business. Who funds the $1.8 billion every year of risk capital that it takes to run this business? Who funds it shouldn't matter. They should be able to get a return on that investment, just like whether they're independent or whether they're vertically integrated.
So maybe you guys will try it again. Does it matter if there are independent broadcasters? Does it matter at all? And could there be steps taken to ensure that they continue to exist?
Let me try that one, since I'm an independent broadcaster.
Sure.
And you are. It was interesting. I was at the Telecom Summit last week, and I noticed a few things I was the only of. I was the only woman who was speaking there out of 17 speakers, and I was the only non-vertically integrated broadcaster. So I think it takes both. I think, you know, we live in a world where scale is absolutely necessary. I think you need to be able to invest in things in a large way. I think also independence is important. When you look at any developed country around the world, there is that balance. There is that opportunity for large companies who are vertically integrated and those which are independent and float between. And I think, you know, betwixt and between lies the benefits, because it doesn't take long before a vertically integrated company, particularly with technology moving so fast, is no longer vertically integrated because something else has come on top that it can't own. In the States right now, the virtual MSO is happening in a big way, and that's something that these guys will have to grapple with as they move along. But it changes, and it means that when you think you're vertically integrated, soon enough it's going to turn and you won't be anymore.
Yeah, it's a real interesting question, and when you look at us, we certainly don't have the scale in television. You know, we have a really robust sports offering with Sportsnet, but the vertical integration is not something that we see significant advantages in. We are an incredibly diverse portfolio with the Shopping Channel, the Toronto Blue Jays, Rogers Centre, publishing, digital, radio, and television. So if we horizontally integrate them within our own business, then we can be very successful. But we almost, from a television perspective, you can almost look at us as an independent, because if you look at, for example, FX, and this is kind of a, from an independent perspective, is an interesting case study, because FX has unbelievable premium content. Like the American Horror Story, like Sons of Anarchy, Louie, and so forth. Yet that, despite the fact that that's exclusive, premium, world-class content, we don't have distribution deals with Shaw and with Bell, two of the big distributors. So being a vertically integrated company doesn't give us any more advantage than it would the independent producer. What I would say, if you're an independent producer, is despite the challenges we're having with FX, I still believe that we'll get that distribution, because at the end of the day, consumers will demand that high content. We just have to wait you guys out. But it comes down to the content, and it comes down to how riveting that is, because consumers are going to take you where you want to go. And they're consuming media in so many different places, on so many different platforms, but at the end of the day, it's all about great content. And so independent producers will succeed if they produce great content. If they produce average content, then I think they'll have a tough time.
Did you say you weren't vertically integrated?
I said I said we're not vertically integrated
not so much.
in the same way.
Oh,
Paul, over to you.
I don't know what to say to that. I love it, though. But I'll tell you what.
Next thing you know, he'll be a public
We're
broadcaster.
not vertically integrated either, so I don't know what all the... we think this is good. We think it's been really great for our company. I think the broadcasting industry has always benefited from diversity. That's always been part of what we've and in fact, Canadians enjoy the diversity of programming on their television sets like no other country. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful program offering that's there. And I think it'd be a shame if we didn't have some independent players, because frankly, some of the concepts that come up with the small independent broadcasters are not ones that we would go for. We were looking to kind of aggregate against core demographics and various things. We think of program strands and how they knit together between channels. I mean, it's a different view of things. So I think that there are safeguards in place to ensure that there will be independent broadcasters, and I think we're finding also that the distribution community, even though they're hard to make deals with, whether you're vertically integrated or not, will eventually come to terms with the channels that are out there. The problem with the distribution is there's so many channels. I mean, it's just there's so much out there that there's capacity issues.
Let's talk about advertising. It's been a year of tumult and change in the advertising world, ad exchanges, particularly, and also the economy's been a bit dodgy. You've all experienced this. What are you concerned about in terms of advertising, and how are you focusing your attention? Kirsten, do you want to start?
We've actually been bucking the trend in a way for a little bit, but I guess that's also because we appeal to a different kind of audience. We're not really the commodity buy for advertisers. We tend to be more of a kind of premium buy for people. So when you see the fluctuations in the market, we definitely got affected, as everyone did back in 2009. But this time around, we're actually still seeing growth after growth, which is a good thing. I think we've got a number of now Canadian shows that are performing well that we own. We co-own them with independent producers. We own them ourselves. And that ability to have homegrown content that you can actually work together with the advertising community is a good thing. And I think that we've been trying to capitalize that without affecting editorial, obviously, as much as we can. And that's been a good relationship that we've had with the independent producers. And we've seen our percentage. We've hit all of our targets, even with hockey, and thank God for Game 6 now. We have seen the slide in digital. There has been a slide in digital advertising, which is a bit ironic given that's where people are investing their money. But it seems to be more specifically in print digital, and that's where we see our friends at the Globe and Mail and Toronto Star starting to suffer a bit, because the print that appears on digital isn't selling like it used to, but video is in huge demand. And so anybody like us who creates a lot of content can figure out a way to get it digitally out there, then I think we can make up that difference.
What's the view on the private side? Keith?
Well, I think that it's, as I said before, I think it's shifted. And we're very fortunate that we have multiple platforms, so we can integrate and create marketing solutions that are very robust in nature. But it is a shift. There's no question that marketers now have an infinity in terms of options to advertise, and whether it be on Google, whether it be in Facebook, whether it be through other over-the-top services, definitely through digital. Actually, in terms of the marketing slide, as far as digital goes, that Kirsten is making reference to, if you look at it, internet protocol marketing is now making up close to 25% of the industry, and that's supposed to go to 50% by 2015. That's significant. So I think that all of us have to look at advertising and see that multi-platform solutions is what advertisers and clients are going to need. You know, gone are the days when you could literally, you know, I think it was the Rick Brace used to say you know, people would never get fired for buying Hockey Night in Canada. I think no advertising agency person would ever get fired now for buying Google.
Are you going to buy Hockey Night in Canada?
Yeah.
They can't, it's not for sale.
Yeah.
Slipped one in there, right?
But so
No, it's
I
ours
think it's a monumental shift, and it forces all of us to actually look at it and be more creative marketing solution people.
Paul?
Yeah, I agree that the social media throws a bit of a twist into the whole thing. It is a way of getting the message out that doesn't rely on traditional media. It takes money to do it, but it, you know, it's technically a lot of it's non-paid, and then you've got big budgets going forth to Google and Facebook. So at the end of the day, these are destabilizing the market in general, but I think you can only control what you can control, and we know that television viewership is stable as it's always been, 25 or 26 hours a week. And we know that there's, you know, building in specialty and building in digital, and some of that's coming out of conventional. I think we're doing a pretty good job at capitalizing on the revenues on specialty and not very good on digital at all. And that's because we don't measure it properly. We don't have single source data to go to. So we're behind as an industry in North America, probably worldwide, catching up with digital and how to make sure that we can properly monetize it. So there's going to be a leak in the bucket until we get on top of that.
Kevin?
Well, it's interesting. We talked about social and Facebook and things. What I find is marketers who used to be really predictable. You know, CMOs used to make annual plans on their media mix, and it usually was delivered as a mix. They might have budget fluctuations, but the allocations. Now, they are really holding back, and they're kind of all following the next shiny thing. And Facebook in the last 6 months has been the shiny thing, and I think it's actually losing its luster, which I'm pretty encouraged by. I don't understand, frankly. I'm mystified by the appeal of whenever you go on your own Facebook pages and you look for the advertising and where it's placed and the context that it's in. It's a horrible place to advertise. I must be really moving. It's a horrible place to advertise a major brand. Now, I think social media, and we're seeing now Twitter, probably everybody in this room has many people they follow on Twitter, so the hardest thing is really catching as you're scrolling through what's relevant. And these promoted tweets now are crazy annoyances. And so I actually don't think they are very good advertising platforms, and I'm kind of encouraged that the luster is going to come off of them. Now, what they are fantastic at doing is promoting traditional media. And actually, when people are using social media to engage in content that's on traditional media, we're seeing tremendous lifts in viewership, in time stuck, and in return viewing.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to throw the mics open for questions in a couple of minutes. So just think of your questions, and we'll invite them. But before that, a question about the CBC. Kirsten, if you could, you've had budget cuts yet again. You've had some great success in programming ratings recently. What is really on your mind? And then I'd like to hear from the three gentlemen how they would like, what they expect and want from the CBC, and what you might hope changes at the CBC. But first, to you, Kirsten.
No pressure there, guys. It has been an interesting year. It's as I said, it's kind of the best of times, the worst of times when you end up with the. We had a record-breaking winter season where it looked really good the first week because we had launched a bunch of new shows like Arctic Air and Mr. D that did fantastically well, and people said, "Oh, well, let's see what happens in a couple weeks." And sure enough, by the end of the season, we had our best ever season for Canadian content, which is great because I think you've seen the success of Continuum, you've seen the success of Bomb Girls, of Canada's Got Talent, you've seen all kinds of Lost Girl. Everything is just it is interesting to see that Canadians are really embracing Canadian content in a big way. The challenge is we're on a roll. And we needed the resources that we had in order to keep going on the same kind of momentum that we had, to be quite frank. And now that the cuts have come, people have seen the effects of that. We've done a lot of speaking out to the public and speaking to our partners about what that means in terms of fewer hours and commissioned, which is very sad, because this is, again, a time when we thought, we would be able to keep going. Success begets success. And right now we're caught in a world where we have to cut them back. And we're cutting back across the board, so it's not like anything kind of is left untouched. And all we can do is hope that in the near future, these innovations that we find, either interesting partnerships that we can do with producers for traditional content, or the things that we might be able to do digitally that kind of create more hours and more. Because I think Canadians are huge consumers and love now. They've all of a sudden triggered on to how much they enjoy Canadian content wherever they find it. And I think the CBC, being the greatest commissioner of all that, has the most to gain. But how can we, and this is what we're working on now, and we're doing interesting things like CBC Hamilton, which is our first digital-only station. So we opened a station which has a main office is like the size of this stage, I would say, and it has 2 journalists, 5 people all together, and that saved money that we would have normally spent on setting up a traditional station that we can then spread around and do other things at the CBC. So the more we can find interesting ways to do things and take advantage of technology as it comes upon us, and we can actually do things in better, cheaper, faster ways, then the more we can invest into the programming and do that, in the sense that we always have. I think it's, we try to stand out there. We try to be good partners, and I think, we are beneficiaries of a lot of great talented people across the country, and we want to keep being that way. That's our main purpose. That's what we're here for. We want to make sure that we are here and strong, because I think in many ways it is a delicate balance, what we have here as a media ecosystem. And I think without the CBC being a huge commissioner of all that programming, there's a big industry there. We talk about the 650 jobs that the CBC is going to have to downsize over the next 3 years. We figure that with the 175 hours that we're no longer commissioning, that's another at least 650 jobs that you can't count under the CBC that the independent producers will be suffering. So this is not good, but we're going to try to find our way to make sure that whatever money we do have gets spent in a way that makes sense and makes the most programming.
Gents, is all good with your relation with the CBC? How could you partner more with them or get along better, or is everything just perfect?
Matchmaking? Are you trying to set something up?
I thought that was an excellent answer. Yeah, I do wonder how the, walking through the Calgary airport, how the CBC got their merchandise in some of those gift stores. I thought that was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But I would applaud CBC on certainly their commitment to amateur sport. I think they've done a really good job at that, and I think it's given an outlet for, it's certainly enhanced the Vancouver Olympics based on how much work that CBC had done in the 2 and 3 years leading up to it, carrying all the shows that our athletes stood out on. So I think that they've done a very good job at that, and certainly understand your challenges going forward.
Yeah, it's not very controversial, but also kind of applaud the work that you've been doing. I mean, you can see the results in the ratings on the Canadian content side, and also on local news that the plan has been working. In a perfect world, would we rather there was one less player in conventional, for sure, but it might as well be city, as far as I'm concerned.
It was all so friendly until just right now.
Well, if we were vertically integrated, then we'd be able to compete more with you big boys.
Kevin?
No, nothing to add, Michael. I would echo.
Okay, thanks. Are there questions from the floor? What we might do, seeing that it's 7 minutes to 6, if there's more than one question, ask for them to be delivered, sort of all in a row, and then we'll let our panelists choose what to answer, as they're so good at. Are there any questions? I can't. Oh, one right here. Maybe just shout and I'll try and repeat it.
Okay, my name is Brandy Yanchik. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'd like to hear from all of you what your commitment is to Canadian documentary filmmakers.
So documentary filmmakers, Another question, too? We'll fire a couple questions up and then ask them to answer.
Bradley Shen with M2O. Specific to the idea of Canadian content, what are we doing to really encourage online and digital content when you still take the fact that if you take 3 months of YouTube content and take all of you up there combined times 2, you have more Canadian content on YouTube being generated for free. So what are we doing to truly innovate the online space and to bring that content forward?
Is there one more question? Or we'll let them answer those two. I don't see a hand, so go ahead, folks.
Well, I'll start on documentaries. We have a couple of outlets, and we just completed a series of 8 documentaries for TSN that have turned out fantastic, focusing on a bit of a celebration of the 100th Grey Cup, but really less about football and more about Canadiana and how the CFL has been interwoven in so much of the fabric of Canada. And each documentary focuses on different ways that the CFL has impacted Canadians. And so there's a good example in our factual channels like Discovery. You know, we have many documentary-like programming, and so we continue to support. I think on the digital, it's interesting. I don't think of YouTube right now until they get into scripted, professionally produced, or unless they're airing that kind of stuff. I don't think of user-generated right now as competitive. That viewing and that consumption hasn't taken away from the kind of entertainment that we produce and deliver. So I'm very proud of the growth and the size of actually our long-form digital delivery of video, whether it be on mobile. We have a spectacular live streaming mobile platform that's available to mobile carriers, and all of our websites and our tablet apps are really, really significant sources now of viewing of CTV and our specialty content.
I'd say, you know, I could completely disagree with Kevin on his YouTube comment, and I think that we have to really worry as an industry and as a video content industry that we come along here and then all of a sudden it goes like that. And the example I can give is reading the recent article about the newspaper industry, because everybody said newspapers were dead in 2000 or the late 1990s. The newspaper industry was just going, and it didn't go like this. It just went like this, and then it went. You know, the New York Times went from a $60 share price to a $5 share price almost overnight. You know what happened with the Ottawa Journal and the Edmonton Journal, the Ottawa Citizen, the Calgary Herald last week. The Post is down to 4. And I just worry that YouTube, and if we don't address the gentleman's question in terms of developing digital Canadian content in a more robust fashion, then all of a sudden YouTube and networks like Much Music or MTV just all of a sudden come like that. And that's what I worry about if we don't find a way to attack the over the tops and the new entrances in the building. I look at Shaw and Bell and CBC as great competitors, but they certainly are just one component of the competitive industry now. And I look differently. I look at YouTube and Google as direct competitors, and I look more at what's going to happen in the next 5 years. As far as documentary producers, we have the lowest CMF envelope, you know, considerably lower. We're certainly going to work feverishly to try to get that up in the coming years. We now have a full Canadian content division, which is growing, led by Claire Freeland. And so we're now we did very little documentaries in years past, but we're starting to see a lot more action.
I just want, because I just can't lose it. Quality content. I just think that the YouTube phenomena. It takes quality content, and it's interesting when you look at Lilyhammer being produced by Netflix, or you look at the Google productions that they're funding. And I think that Google on YouTube has like 100 channels that they have launched and that they're funding. And much of that I see is that's going to compete the same way that we compete for quality. And I look at the volume of production that comes out of this room, out of Hollywood, out of other sources. And even still, that they're still going to face the same odds of success in creating, and the creative process hasn't changed because of it being paid for by digital dollars. The creative process is still the same to garner big audiences. And I'm encouraged because even though our kids are multitasking and they're watching content here and they're doing everything else, ratings with 18 to 34-year-olds, it's the fastest growing viewership of linear television right now. So the 18 to 34-old age group is actually pretty healthy right now. And so against all of this other consumption they're doing.
And the 25 to 54 demo is the fastest growing online. And they're the fastest growing, believe it or not, in the likes of YouTube and so forth. I just fundamentally believe that the over-the-tops are, and the likes of Google and Apple announcing they are going to produce 10 movies and on their own. Google is going to get into original content. I just believe that it's something that we really, really have to have our eyes wide open about, that they are going to take a bite out of our business.
This reminds me 1982 when the first Canadian pay channels were being considered for licensing, and CTV and Global said, no, we don't. So the big privates, Chum was different, said, no, this is the only room for a handful of channels. Don't license these new things. They're not going to amount to much. And roll forward 30 years, they've amounted to a lot. And that creativity and innovation came from the edges, and it was seen to be almost as kind of, off the mainstream as YouTube is today.
All I'm saying is that the industry can change like that. The iPad changed everything. Will the iPanel change everything with Apple TV? I just think that we just really have to, as an industry, be prepared to adapt very, very quickly to the changes, because they happen.
On that, they've got so much economic scope. It's a scary thought to what companies they could buy. And you think of, it's hard to make great content, right? And it's not in every company's DNA, but their capitalization's unbelievable.
Yeah, the funds that Google is coming out with for production are quite impressive. I hear about our independent producers who we work with who are going off to make deals with Google. That's a new place for them, and I think but like you said, Michael, I think it goes back to, there's going to be a point at which we're going to be at a breaking point, perhaps, but the consumption just seems to keep growing, and I think the points that Kevin and you make are kind of the same, and that yes, there's going to be more, so watch out, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to be affecting certain areas. It seems that the consumption just kind of we kind of expand to the. And I'd say,
and just don't fall into the same. It's not affecting it. It wasn't affecting newspapers either. Everyone was saying that newspapers was going along. In fact, subscription was going higher, ad revenue was going higher, and then it just went. And that's all I'm saying. So I'm not saying it's time to panic now, but be aware that it can happen very, very quickly.
It happened to the music business too, and I think you can look at that to see where, because we seem to follow behind music in terms of what happens to us as an industry, and they find their level. Things have changed completely compared to what they were before, but I think that goes back to what we've all been saying, which is the pressure that we're under has to deal with change, and the change happens quickly, and it's happening. You can't anticipate it, but all you can anticipate the fact is that there's going to be change. And I think the interesting thing is it's still the creative and the content that, we had this debate whether it's distribution that's king, and because someone said to me, distribution is king now. And I said, well, if distribution is king, then content's the kingdom. Because in the end, you can't, it's great to have all these great distribution platforms, and to be vertically integrated is obviously an incredibly good advantage in many ways, but at the same time, you have to have great content to deliver, and we work with all these guys. And we work with Netflix, and we work with Apple, and we work with, we have the ability to kind of spread that content throughout, and that's a good thing.
Michael, what I think will happen, though, is I think traditional players, I think the content, you talked about the quality of what we saw in LA this year and in the last couple of years, and there's no question that channels like AMC and HBO and a lot of the specialties and things that, that have been around relatively recent are putting a lot of pressure on the creative process that the traditional networks are under. And I think they're producing much better quality content as a result of it. If Google and Netflix and these guys catch on to content that's successful, then that's great. The competitive environment makes everybody better, and I think that they'll adapt. The last thing I want to say, though, I just want it to be on record for this room, because I'm not sure how appreciated it is. The biggest pressure point I see that makes it so hard for all of us to nurture a Canadian program and make it a Canadian hit. And I'll use Combat Hospital as an example of what I thought was spectacular program, you know, and a lot of hats off, and it performed outstanding in Canada, but didn't make it to a second season because of our need with the U.S. broadcast, with the U.S. broadcasters and networks being here, because of the difficulty we have in scheduling and nurturing Canadian hits, promoting them, and then if they don't do well in the U.S., there's just not a commitment there, and they can't get the international funding without the U.S. to stay on. We saw this week, last week, Saving Hope was a huge success in Canada, and it did really lukewarm on NBC, and that's a huge concern about the survivability of that program. So I'd like to be able to, you know, do a couple of things. I'd like to find a way to get control over our schedules, and non-simultaneous substitution is something I've been talking about as a possibility. And then I'd like for us to not be so dependent on a U.S. over-the-air network as a funding source. I think we have to find other ways.
It's tough. It's tough to do. I mean, I think that we've had good success with great success with Rookie Blue, and you know, Combat Hospital was a casualty, but it's only one of the many models, right? I mean, that's just one of the models. There's 100% Canadian content, no partnership model. There's U.S. partners. There's foreign, you know, offshore partners. There's lots of ways to cut that.
We haven't gotten into the syndication, or sorry, the simulcast business with the U.S. simply because we couldn't be in a position where we could let a U.S. control our schedule. But there are lots of ways, you know, that it's great that you can get the Saving Hopes and Rookie Blues out of those partnerships with the U.S. But when we partner with the U.S., we looked at people who don't come in over the border. So there is, you know, there is something in that about the effect of the channels when they come in over the border. The partners that you can have and the partners that you choose, you know, you have to choose wisely.
Last word to Keith.
If we really knew what was the future of this industry and we had the answers, then we'd all be as wealthy as you, Michael.
I thought that's why. I thought that's why you're sitting in these chairs.
Well, he's the only one without socks, too.
Yeah, it costs more. Yeah. I'm delighted to hear you talking, Kevin, about non-simultaneous substitution. I've been advocating that for years and years and years, and I think it would be a great idea. In any event, thanks to our four panelists for being part of it. It sounds like, with the Queen's Jubilee in mind, you're somewhere between keep calm and carry on and panic and freak out. Somewhere in between. Thanks very much.